tried to work toward a compromise, and they became a hindrance as opposed to a help in helping us to find a realistic a bill that could pass. And I think it was our intention to come back next year and pass a realistic bill. But to be honest, when things like this happen, you have to kind of question who you want to be negotiating with. And so I think it's absolutely ridiculous that they're doing this. I do think that Representative Maggart will win. And we'll be back down here trying to find a solution in spite of some of the gun groups as opposed to working with those gun groups.
Now you said you guys that there was a compromise. I mean, wasn't it the gun rights folks who said, well, let's narrow this down to just gun permit holders? Didn't they offer that compromise?
That was a compromise that I offered, and reluctantly, after about a month, they agreed to that, to allow us to do that. I think those are exact words. And we had another agreement that we worked through with the Georgia bill that passed. I think we had that on the table, and we thought that was an agreement with some of the gun groups, and that didn't work out well. As a matter of fact, the young lady that was their lobbyist here was no longer here because I think she offered that compromise, and some higher ups got upset with her. But this is there's not a more pro Second Amendment person in the state of Tennessee than me. But this is not a Second Amendment right issue. The Second Amendment protects us from our government, from the government taking our firearms. This is a contract between two people. We're talking about a landowner and an employee. So this is not, and actually I even got NRA to agree that this is not a Second Amendment right issue. It is a self-defense issue. Yet, every phone call they make, every mail piece they do, they call it a Second Amendment issue, even though they told me, you're right, it's not a Second Amendment issue.
Why are they making such an example in Tennessee?
Well, I don't know. You have to ask them that, because I think we tried to work with them. We tried to work out a compromise, and suddenly, about 3 months into the session, they made it very obvious that they didn't want to compromise. It's kind of their way of the highway. So I have no idea why they're making an example not only out of Tennessee, but an example out of Deborah Maggart, because I think she tried to work toward that compromise.
So where do you think there is a middle that you guys can reach?
Absolutely. I mean, the bill that I was talking about coming back next year would probably have some whereas clauses that lays out, that helps the general public understand that you first have to take a class, and that you first have to go through a background check, and you put your fingerprints on file. Because usually if you sit down and explain that to people, that these are the ones that we're allowing to actually carry these, most people say, well, that's reasonable. But that's not the way it started last year. It started out with a reasonable bill. And I even talked about, for those gated parking lots that I've had some trouble with, that you have to actually take a copy of your gun carry permit and put it on file in your personnel file, and say I may have a firearm in my glove compartment, and things like that. Yes, I think it could be worked out, but now we're to the point of when you mash somebody in the mouth, they're not really willing to compromise usually. So I don't know where we're going to be the next year.
What do you mean you don't know?
I don't know what the mood of the General Assembly will be when we come back in. Whether it will be a mood to pass a bill, or whether it will be a mood that you don't negotiate with people that threaten. I don't know where it will be.
Mm-hmm. So the perception is that they're trying to bully you guys, or?
That isn't a perception. That's pretty obvious. That's what's happening. It isn't just a perception. That's reality. So yes.
Mm-hmm. So. Did you just say the lieutenant governor and other Republicans are being bullied by the NRA?
Attempting to be. I'm not saying we are, but they're attempting that. That's pretty obvious.
So is this kind of a make or break moment for you guys in terms of being told by a special interest group that thou shalt do something?
I've never had a special interest group go this far on anything. That usually, and the ironic part is, we agree with them on most of the issues. This just happens to be one that, again, is not a Second Amendment right issue. This is a contract issue between two people. This is private property rights versus gun rights. This is a self-protection issue. It has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. And so therefore, we're going to figure out where we need to be on the middle ground. I'm hoping to get there. I don't know where we'll be when we come back in session.
Go ahead, Andy. I'm sorry.
Well, the Georgia law, sets out some specific exemptions that if you've got gated parking lots or secure parking lots, that they can, the employer can control who comes on and who can bring guns. So is that something that?
Obviously, I would be more than willing to agree with that, and they were willing to agree with that for a while. Now, maybe that's too broad after I get to thinking about it and looking at it a little more closely. That something that I'm talking about, that you have a blanket right to do it, but you have to notify your employer before you do that to let them know we have a gun carry permit. Maybe that's where we end up. And again, those negotiations broke down about 3/4 of the way through the session when it became obviously their way or the highway, and that's where we ended up.
Are you surprised? I mean, this line in the sand over this particular
Absolutely, I'm surprised because there is not a more Second Amendment friendly state than the state of Tennessee. I personally carried the bill for gun carry permits. I personally carried the bill that will keep from cities and counties from suing firearm manufacturers, on and on and on. And so yes, on an issue that's really not a Second Amendment right issue, but is a self-defense issue, yes, I'm surprised that they've gone this far. They probably have spent more money in this one race than they've spent in the state of Tennessee in the last 10 years. I don't know that they've ever put $75,000 of cash, and they'll mail out the postcards and stuff like that. I don't know that they've done that in the last 10 years, so it is surprising, yes.